Hello, I am Amy Baldwin, and I'm going to be kind of helping you in the next 3 videos, this one included, on how to plan your course for ACAD 1300. So this is especially created for those who are brand new faculty, but hopefully I'll keep it short and sweet enough that everybody who has taught before can use it as a refresher. There is some new information about some of the required assignments in part 2. So you may want to look at that in particular, but I'm going to start with kind of just an overview of creating your course. I can't talk and walk at the same time, so I'm trying to get my slides up. So hopefully you can see these slides. I'll find out after this recording is over, I'm sure, if this happened or not. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of the overview and the philosophy of the course, and share with you a little bit of backwards design if you're not familiar with that. So what we're going to do is, in this short video, review the key principles for developing a successful course and also consider some key components of student learning. So some things that you might want to think about as you plan your course and decide what you want to do each day. Just some friendly reminders, some of this stuff has changed. So these are updated, this is updated information. ACAD 1300, which is Journeys to Success, is required for all students who are also required to enroll in a transitional course. This is a little bit of a change from semesters past. We've had students who are conditionally admitted before, and those students were required to take ACAD 1300. They may not have needed a transitional course, but they were still conditionally admitted. We do not have that designation anymore. So that is one reason why we have fewer students enrolled, but it is something that you want to be aware of. Those students are required to enroll and stay enrolled in the course, and that will affect attendance. It is also recommended to all other students. So you may have students who are high achievers in high school. They may have at least one semester under their belt and they are looking for a first-year seminar. So just be aware that you're going to have a variety of different students. It is a first-year seminar course, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means. It is a designation. It is a requirement that all first-time entering students take a first-year seminar, and there are certain components to the course that make it a first-year seminar. So I'll share those or refresh your memory of those again. Those are things that need to be present in the course because those are indications of it being a first-year seminar. It is also thankfully part of the lower division core in the responsible living category. So it does provide students with the ability to, hate to use this term, but check a box and be able to, at least follow the lower division core check sheet and get credit for this course. It's overall a great opportunity to explain how college works. It's definitely a pathway for students to develop some personal connection with the content. A lot of the content can be focused on them and what their experiences are. And it's also, I don't think it is, a strategy for improving retention, persistence, and graduation. That's been shown through research, national research. And so we do find it incredibly compelling for students to do if it's done well, if it's presented well. They learn a lot, they get to find strategies that work for them. But overall, the institution benefits from a course like this because it does help students do the things that they need to be doing to be successful in college. I want to share really quickly, though, a former student, Tyree Tillman, who just graduated from UCA. He nursing student, took Journeys to Success and was interviewed by the UCA magazine a couple of years ago about his experience at UCA. And one of the things that makes me most proud and our department most proud is that he indicated his experience in Journeys to Success really did help him with his success overall. Now, truth be told, he was an excellent student coming in, very open to learning all the different things that he could do to be even more successful. But I do think it's a great indication that even good students can benefit from this course. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how to think about planning your course. This is a principle of backward design. I'll share at the very end kind of the components of backwards design if you're kind of a nerd like me and want to explore it a little further. But really what it is a thinking about what you want students to end the course with. We often like to jump in and kind of get excited about what we want to start with, but you really need to pause for a second and think about what are the course goals. I'll explain those in a minute. What are those learning objectives? Those objectives are in the syllabus, so if you want to refresh your memory of those. And then I'm going to add this piece to it that I got from some of the research that I did on planning courses. And I can't remember the authors, but they describe it as essential questions. What are the essential questions that you want students to be able to answer? And when you think about those kinds of things, first, it can help with the planning overall. So some of our course goals, these are kind of general. These are not specific course learning objectives. I'll share those in just a second. But really, this course is about increasing college knowledge, how the college works, how one navigates it, how to talk to professors, all of those things that we consider kind of the ins and outs of being in this environment. It also improves self-awareness. If you do it with this kind of intention, you're going to be giving students the ability to figure out how well they do in certain situations and what they need to be doing differently. And so think about that as a part of the process. It could come through discussion. It could come through reflection, like journals. It could come through other types of assignments where we raise their self-awareness about who they are, what they want to accomplish in college, and how they need to make some changes perhaps, or at least start doing things or keep doing things to make that happen. It's also about refining academic and personal skills. Time management, note taking, navigating the final exam schedule, all those things are going to be part of the course and are going to be really helpful to students. And probably one of the most important aspects of this course is introducing resources, and not just strategies, but also campus resources to support success. Probably best done in context versus here's the tutoring center, check it out. Here's the student health center. You ought to go there sometime. Those are just kind of introductory kinds of ways to get students information about these resources. And I'm talking about like finding ways to incorporate them in assignments, maybe requiring that they go to the tutoring center or use various resources to help a case studied student, a fake student, solve a problem. So those kinds of things you may want to think about as well when you plan. So here are the learning objectives. They are in the syllabus. You can check those out there, but do notice that they cover a wide variety of things, and there are different ways that you can get at learning objectives. So you don't have to go in order. You don't have to make everything towards a test. So for example, creating short-term and long-term academic goals, something that could be easily done in a day in class, maybe at the beginning of the semester. Why are you here? What kind of degree do you want? And then you can revisit that at the end of the semester. You can turn it into a paper about their goals, or you could just ask them to reflect on what they said at the beginning of the semester and how that might change. So a variety of ways you can get at course learning objectives. You don't have to do it all the same way. So I talked about essential questions. What do we want students to be able to answer by the end of the semester? So whenever I sat down to figure out what are those questions that we want answered, that led me to developing basically our final exam. So you've got access to it. Students can have access to it early. I do think it's a great pedagogical tool to say, hey, here are your final exam questions. This is what we're going to cover all semester. And you already have them in front of you. So now you know what you need to be paying attention to, what you need to be working on, and I'm going to help you with answering those questions. So great pedagogical strategy is not considered cheating at all, because every student's going to approach the answers a little differently. It's kind of like giving them essay questions ahead of time. So what are those required assignments? I'm going to tell you that part 2 of this video series will go in depth on these, so I'm not going to right now, but notice that I added something on the list that I have talked about, but never for some reason put it on the list of required assignments. It's updated now in your folder. But we have had a common final exam. You just saw the questions. We can talk about variety of ways of deploying that. But I really am becoming even more insistent on having something during finals week that is a final, that is comprehensive, that requires them to prepare, requires them to show up. All of those things may seem like, kind of arbitrary, but they're an essential task or skill that they need to develop. And it is fine if all of their other classes aren't doing that. They still need to have that experience. And I think ACAD 1300 can provide that for them. So there is common final exam. There is that self-awareness assignment. And in part 2 of this video series, I'm going to give you some examples, maybe give you some more concrete ideas on how to do that. That is tied to our responsible living rubric. So it is essential that we have this in the course, because otherwise we shouldn't be in responsible living category if we don't have a responsible living assignment. We also have a written and collaborative assignment that we have tied to our information literacy content. All that stuff is plug and play. I'll show you some examples of that in part 2. And another component of a first-year seminar is exposing students to the UCA core, helping them understand the importance of it. And we're also required to have some sort of UCA core assignment. Again, I'll get into some detailed examples in the next video, but just to let you know that's there. So some things that I want you to think about as you're planning the course. Again, kind of taking the big picture here. All of this information, these tables that I'm going to show you in a minute, are in the instructor's resource manual in the first 18 pages. So if you're not familiar kind of the ups and downs of the first year, I would encourage you to look at some of these examples. So you're going to see students at the very beginning of the semester, especially the fall, very excited, but also very nervous, often kind of lonely, a little homesick. They may be still pulling on and relying on family and friends from high school, and it's a really big deal for them to make new friends on campus. So I want you to be aware of that. That could be an opportunity for you to talk about it in class, do an activity. Certainly, it could be the impetus for getting them to connect with each other in the class and learn names and learn a little bit about each other. Whenever they go through that semester, there are going to be some ups and downs. We know that during the first 5 weeks, or about week 5, they're going to be getting feedback and grades on assignments, and that's going to potentially be lower than they expect. They're going to fail things that they've never failed before. They're going to get a B if they've never gotten a B before. And so giving them an opportunity to talk about that, have some content around that, can be really helpful. So I want you to consider that as you're planning. You don't just have to focus on the first semester. The milestones continue through the second semester. And another great way at the end of the first semester to kind of preempt them, talk about what they may experience. As you're planning the course, part 3, I'm going to talk about the week by week planning part, but you may want to go ahead and be aware of what's going on in terms of campus activities and events. If you are not in the know, I'll share some stuff with you. If you are somebody that already knows when Majors Fair usually is, or when advising starts their appointments, go ahead and start thinking about that when you're planning. If you don't know that information, don't worry. Like I said, I'll share that with you as we move along, and you can give announcements, provide some information about that. Some other things that happen on campus that you maybe want to be aware of. Usually about week 3 or 4, we do what's called Fail Forward Week. That is sponsored by the Office of Student Success. Again, another event that you can incorporate into the course through discussion, through content, through a video that you share, through an assignment, or you can just tell them, hey, this is happening on campus. I want you to participate in it. So think about those things in terms of what's going on at UCA. Now I want to focus on the book if you're using it. So there are 12 chapters. You are not under any obligation to cover all 12. Some of them are quite detailed, and the order may not be conducive to what you want to do. I never, ever teach a book in the order in which it's presented, even if it's a book that I've written. And so just be aware that you don't have to do that. I'll give you an example. Chapter 4, planning your academic pathways does not make sense to me that early in a semester. I always pair it with chapter 12 and 10, and we do it as they start thinking about what they're doing next semester. So definitely you're going to see some chapters that fit very nicely with our course learning objectives. Pull on those. If you need to add some extra information, feel free to do that as well. Just know that trying to fit all 12 chapters plus the final plus information literacy, which I'll share in a minute, makes it hard to do, but it can be done if you want to do it. Some things that you might want to know about the chapters if you've not read them thoroughly is they have some features in them that could be used for students to do activities outside of class, like the application or analysis question. It could be something that you could incorporate into the class. And definitely those student surveys, student profile, and what students say are great ways to open up discussion. Students can take these online, and while they won't necessarily, you won't see their results, individual results, you will see basically an aggregate view of how students have answered across the US. So if you pull up that feature and you see some charts and tables, know that it is every student that has ever taken that survey, regardless of where they live or go to school. So some other things to think about in terms of planning the course. Try to make this short and sweet, but again, it's hard to do. The next videos will be short, I promise. Think about organizing around units. So you might see that those essential questions fit nicely into units, might fit into 4 units that follow along these lines. Certainly something to consider. Another one is perhaps shrinking it down to 3 units and moving some stuff around, like the health part. That could be part of unit 3. It could be part of unit 1. May not totally make sense in unit 2, but you can probably make it fit. These slides just show you kind of what an overview of the unit could be, and then it's got some suggested chapters. So if you want to go back and kind of peruse this at your leisure, you're going to have access to these slides, but certainly may want to think about those kind of units as a way of capturing the information. It makes a lot of sense to me, and may make a lot of sense to students to know that once we complete this section, we're going to move on to something a little different. In the strengthening academic strategies, this could definitely be the place where the information literacy content resides. I often couple it with academic strategies because they need to learn how to use the library, use sources, present those sources, but just know that it could be its own standalone unit if you wanted it to. Developing personal habits and behaviors for success. You notice probably in the essential questions that there's a question about health and mental health and stress. Really important to discuss this, talk about resources, and that is usually tied to chapter 11, which is engaging in a healthy lifestyle. But you could pull it all together like I have here and make it a unit about, understanding diversity and relationships, also how to manage your money, you could do whatever you want to there. The last grouping, which I do think is really important to do, is that focus on planning their course. Planning their academic career. That's where advising can come in and do a presentation if they are available, help them with registration, help them understand AMAPs, those academic maps, degree plans. Love talking about degree works because they can see their progress. So a lot of practical information in this particular unit that students often will say this is really, really helpful to them. So how do you go about planning your course? Again, I'm going to just briefly do a little overview. I'll have in part 3 some more specifics. But if you want to look at those first 18 pages, I've got a week by week kind of guide that can help you with figuring out what you want to do. I've got some learning objectives, I've got suggested readings, and then I've got some reminders or things that you might want to think about while you're planning for that week. It kind of flows with the milestones. Some other things to think about when you're planning your course. What are you going to expect students to do before class? What are you going to expect them to do during class and after class? We often focus just on what cool thing or fun thing or engaging thing am I going to do with them in this 50 or 75 minutes. Great. I would love for you to also spend some time and also communicate with students. Okay, what are they doing to prepare for that day? And then what are they doing to reflect on it? And this is where having assignments due every week or every other week can be really helpful to you so that they're having to touch and think about the material, not just while they're in your class. And that's part of a college education, right? They can't just show up to a math class having done no homework, no review, and expect to understand and connect the material that they learned last week to what they're doing now. Some other things to consider, I call it the 3 A's: activities, assignments, and assessments. Some of these could overlap, but just speaking broadly, what are you going to do to engage students in the information during class? So I think of activities of what are they actively learning to do? Assignments are those things I consider that are assigned after class. Sometimes students call them homework. We don't really use that term. You can, but it sounds a little bit like high school. So again, I refer to those as assignments. What are things that are going to take more time that you need to do on your own? And then assessments can be activities. They can also be assignments, but they're basically how well are students learning the material? And can you give them some feedback through those assessments? A quiz, a test, a paper can be an assessment if it's graded and given back in a way that provides them with either formative or evaluative assessment, formative or summative, assessment feedback. So examples of activities, these are in the instructor's manual. There's a bunch of them. So if you are worried about what am I going to do in class, I'd start there. We also have some very generous adjuncts who have shared things along the way, and I'll continue to add to our Google Drive and our folders and share anything else that people have. So you're going to see a lot of case scenarios. Those can be used in all kinds of different formats for activities, discussions. Those could be assessments in and of themselves. And like I said, there are some things in the text, online text, that can be used as activities. Some best practices around that is debrief. Give them an activity and then talk about what was the purpose, what did we learn, what did you, what aha did you have, that kind of thing. If you have activities that connect to larger assignments or assessments, make that clear. So if we do a lot of quizzes in class and you're going to have a test, talk about, okay, if you're not doing as well as you want on these quizzes, this could give you some information about how to study for that test. So think about that so that they're not just standalone activities that really students don't see the connection to. And that's really important. We often see the connection. They don't always. And so sometimes they just think, oh, well, that was kind of a waste of time, or, oh, that was fun and I loved it, but what did that have to do with anything? And so being explicit about, hey, we're going to do a little group activity where I'm going to help you build some relationship skills. And we're going to have fun doing it, but this is what it's for. It's going to be helping you on your group assignment that we're doing later. So things like that can be really helpful to them. And anywhere you can encourage some collaboration and getting to know each other is going to be helpful. Assignments, like I said, I consider those things that are done outside of class, usually take a little more time. Can be done individually, can be done in groups. Go to your instructor's manual, look in the Google Drive folder for some examples of that. When you give assignments, just had this experience in my online class this summer. Need to remind them, you got to follow directions. Need to remind them whenever I ask a question about a topic that comes from the chapter, I want to see that you read the chapter. Sometimes we think, oh my God, why do I have to say this? But that's part of the hidden curriculum. Sometimes I just don't know what you're looking for. They're coming from high school where they may have gotten by with not being as much in depth in terms of their reflection. So kind of shepherding them towards the expectations you have can be really helpful. If you have a rubric or have some sort of grading criteria, share that with them. Obviously, you don't have to do that for everything, but it helps on some of those bigger assignments. Give them feedback that is helpful, that tells them what they did well, what they did need to work on, and what they can do in future assignments. And if you have a model assignment, definitely share that. Give them an idea of what the expectation is. So assessments, again, talked about, if you have a rubric or if it's a major assignment, it's always helpful to have a rubric. But talking through those assessments, how they got things right, why they got things wrong, can be very helpful to them. So I use the term formative and summative if you're not familiar with those. Formative assessments are things that help form students. So think about that. They may be quizzes, they could be for a grade or not, but they're not major assessments. They're not a final exam that's worth 30% of your overall grade. So formative assessments can be graded and they can be little smaller stakes, but they're really designed to help students build some skills for a later, more summative, more that's it, you're not getting a revision option type of assessment. And anyway, you can give them some variety of ways to help them test themselves on the content can be very helpful as well. So I'm going to wrap this up. Last slide, promise this was a little longer. The other videos are not going to be this long, so thank you for bearing with me. I just walked you through what's called backward design. Wiggins and Matigi, they have a book on backwards design if you're interested in looking a little bit more in depth on this. But basically what it is you start with those big ideas. What are the skills? What are the essential questions? What do you want them to look like at the end of the semester? What is a ACAD 1300 student who did everything they needed to do and improve look like? Then you want to look for, well, how will you know that they did this? What will show, is it a paper? Is it a presentation? Is it the ability to identify resources or employ skills? How are you going to assess that that happened? And that's where the final exam comes in. That's where the self-awareness paper comes in. And some of the other required assignments can be helpful to you on that. Then you plan your course and your learning experiences and select that content and then figure out what you want to do. It's very natural to start with the last thing, planning those learning experiences first, and then figuring out, well, how am I going to assess it? But these authors say, no, that's the flip side. You need to start with what you want them to do, how you know they're going to do it, and then you plan it. So that's an overview. Hope that helps. The next two videos will be a lot more specific and will be shorter too, I promise. I promise. I just have to talk a little faster, perhaps.